They called it the Gateway Hotel, but the only gate it opened was to hell itself. December 1865. 12 travelers entered the Gateway Hotel on a frozen Missouri night. By morning, the hotel stood silent. Empty, the guests had vanished, but their luggage remained. Their horses stood tied outside, and in the cellar, they found 27 bodies. This is the story of America's first documented serial killing hotel. This is the story of the Bender family's predecessor. This is the story that would inspire nightmares for generations. This is the Hotel of Blood. 1865 was a year when America was bleeding. The Civil War had just ended, leaving the nation scarred and broken. Missouri, a border state torn between North and South, was a wasteland of destroyed farms, burned towns, and wandering souls looking for a fresh start. The roads were crowded with veterans, freed slaves, carpetbaggers, widows, and orphans, all moving west, chasing the promise of new lives. And along these desperate roads, predators waited. 15 miles outside of St. Joseph, Missouri, where the wilderness still ruled and law was a distant memory, stood a 2-story timber building. A hand-painted sign swung in the wind. Gateway Hotel, clean beds, hot meals, fair prices. The hotel appeared in late 1863, built by a family who called themselves the Harps. Nathaniel Harp, a tall man with dead eyes and a mechanical smile. His wife, Ruth, silent as a grave, and their son, Thomas, a young man of 20 with hands too soft for frontier labor. Local farmers were grateful for the way station. Travelers needed rest, and the Harps seemed God-fearing folk. They attended church, they paid their bills, they kept to themselves, but animals knew better. Dogs would not approach the hotel. Horses whinnied and pulled at their reins when hitched outside, and birds. Witnesses claimed no birds ever landed on the Gateway Hotel's roof. Something was wrong with that place, something that creatures could sense even if humans could not. The disappearances began in October 1864. Jacob Weatherly, a Union veteran traveling home to Illinois, stopped at the Gateway Hotel on a Tuesday evening. He wrote a letter to his sister that night, describing his room, the decent meal, and his plan to reach Illinois by the weekend. Jacob Weatherly never reached Illinois. He never sent that letter. It was found years later, sealed and stamped, hidden in a wooden box beneath the hotel's floorboards. At the time, no one noticed. The roads were dangerous. Men disappeared. It was the way of things in 1864. Then in November, Martha Connolly, a schoolteacher relocating to Kansas, vanished while traveling through Missouri. Her family received her last letter from St. Joseph, mentioning she would rest at a small hotel before the final leg of the journey. The constable in St. Joseph made inquiries. Yes, a woman matching that description had been seen. Yes, she had been directed to the Gateway Hotel. But when the constable rode out to inquire, Nathaniel Harp met him with confusion and hospitality. A schoolteacher, no, sir, no woman has stayed here in weeks. Perhaps she found lodging in town instead. These roads can be confusing. Would you like some coffee, constable? The constable, a war-weary man with too many problems and not enough answers, accepted the coffee. He never suspected that Martha Connolly was already in the cellar, 20 feet beneath where he stood. By spring 1865, 4 more people had vanished along that stretch of Missouri road. A peddler, 2 brothers heading west, a Presbyterian minister. Families made inquiries. Constables asked questions. But the Gateway Hotel always had the same answer. Haven't seen them. Perhaps they took a different route. And then came December, when everything changed. On December 18, 1865, an early winter storm was building over Missouri. Travelers knew the signs: the yellow-gray sky, the wind that cut like knives, the smell of snow coming heavy and deep. On this day, 12 people converged on the Gateway Hotel. Henry and Eliza Morrison, newlyweds from Kentucky. Samuel Cross, a Union captain returning home. The Brennan family with their father, mother, and 2 children aged 8 and 6. Dutch Werner, a German immigrant seeking land, Catherine Moore, a widow traveling to her sister, James Talbot and Frederick Cook, business partners, and Reverend Charles Whitmore, a circuit preacher. By 6 o'clock that evening, all 12 had arrived, seeking shelter from the approaching storm. The hotel was full more guests than the Harps had hosted in months. Nathaniel Harp seemed nervous. His mechanical smile flickered. Ruth served dinner in unusual silence even for her. Young Thomas kept glancing at his father, waiting for some signal. Captain Cross, a gregarious man who'd survived 4 years of war, dominated the dinner conversation. He'd noticed something odd. Despite being a hotel, there were no other guests besides tonight's arrivals. Where were the travelers from previous nights? We don't get much traffic this late in the year. Nathaniel explained. You folks are lucky you got here before the storm. The Reverend Whitmore blessed the meal. The children laughed. The widow Moore smiled for the first time in months. For a brief moment, it felt almost normal. Like the war had never happened, like America could heal. But James Talbot, a sharp-eyed merchant, noticed something. The cellar door behind the kitchen had a new lock, a very heavy lock, and there was a smell, faint but unmistakable to anyone who'd been near a battlefield, the smell of death. At midnight, the storm hit with fury. Snow fell in blinding sheets. The wind howled like tortured souls. Inside the Gateway Hotel, the guests slept in their rooms, couples together, single guests in solo rooms, the Brennan children in small cots near their parents. They didn't know that in the kitchen the Harp family was preparing. Nathaniel distributed the weapons, a sledgehammer for himself, a butcher knife for Ruth, a revolver for Thomas. They'd done this before, but never with 12 guests. Never with witnesses who might cry out and wake the others. They had to work quickly, silently, efficiently. Ruth Harp entered the widow Moore's room first. Catherine was asleep, dreaming of her sister's farm in Kansas. She never woke. The knife was professional, precise. Ruth had done this 20 times before. Nathaniel and Thomas took Captain Cross together. The Union veteran was a light sleeper. Years of war had trained him. He woke as the door creaked, saw Nathaniel's silhouette, and reached for his pistol. He wasn't fast enough. The sledgehammer caught him in the temple. The sound was like a melon splitting. Thomas fired the revolver into his chest to be certain. The sound of the gunshot mixed with the howling wind. Inside the hotel, no one else heard. They worked through the night systematically. The newlyweds died in each other's arms, never knowing danger was near. Dutch Werner fought. His door showed claw marks where he'd scratched at the wood, trying to escape. The business partners died separately, minutes apart, each likely hearing the other's muffled struggle and being unable to help. But it was Eliza Brennan who provided the night's most terrible moment. She woke to find Ruth standing over her children with a knife. The mother's scream pierced the storm, a sound of such pure anguish that for a moment, even the wind seemed to pause. She threw herself at Ruth, fighting with a mother's desperate strength. But Nathaniel was there. The sledgehammer fell. The children, blessedly, slept through it all. They died in their sleep, never knowing terror. Reverend Whitmore was the final guest. He woke to silence, an eerie, complete silence more terrifying than any scream. He lit his candle with shaking hands and opened his door. The hallway was empty, but every other door stood open. And from those rooms came nothing, no snoring, no breathing, just silence. He ran for the stairs. Nathaniel was waiting. The Reverend fought. He was 60, 3 years old, but he'd been a soldier before he found God. He broke Nathaniel's nose. He screamed scripture and curses. He promised damnation. It took all 3 harps to bring him down. And as he died, the Reverend spoke his final words. You cannot hide from God. He sees you. He marks you, and hell is waiting. Dawn came gray and cold on December 19th. The storm had passed, leaving 3 feet of snow. The Gateway Hotel stood silent in a white wilderness. Inside, the Harp family worked. They'd done this before, but never on this scale. 12 bodies, 12 sets of belongings to sort, valuables to extract, evidence to destroy, bodies to hide. The cellar was already crowded with the previous 27 victims, buried in a mass grave beneath the dirt floor. But there was always room for more. Thomas worried. 12 at once, Father. People will ask questions. These folks will be missed. Nathaniel, his face swollen from the Reverend's punch, smiled his mechanical smile. The storm will explain everything. Travelers lost in a blizzard. Bodies buried by snow. By spring, no one will remember. But they made mistakes. They kept the luggage. They tied the horses in the stable, planning to sell them later. And they missed the letter. Jacob Weatherly's letter to his sister, sealed and hidden. Most crucially, they didn't know about Samuel Cross's friend. On December 27, 1865, Major William Barrett of the Union Army arrived in St. Joseph, Missouri, looking for his friend Samuel Cross. They'd agreed to meet here. Barrett was traveling from Illinois, Cross from Kentucky. They'd planned to travel to California together, two veterans seeking new lives. But Cross never arrived. Barrett made inquiries. Yes, Cross had been in St. Joseph. Yes, he'd headed out on the 18th. Yes, he'd likely stopped at the Gateway Hotel. Everyone did. Barrett was not a constable making casual inquiries. He was an army investigator who'd tracked Confederate spies during the war. He'd seen deception. He knew how to find lies. He rode to the Gateway Hotel alone. Nathaniel Harp met him with the usual mechanical smile. Captain Cross, no sir, haven't seen him. Perhaps the storm, Barrett interrupted him. The storm passed 8 days ago. The roads are clear. And you're telling me 12 people took shelter here that night, yet none of them continued their journeys. Nathaniel's smile flickered. 12? I don't recall. The stable master in St. Joseph saw them all leave town that afternoon, headed this direction. 12 travelers. A storm approaching. This is the only shelter for 15 miles. Barrett's hand rested on his service revolver. Where are the guests, Mr. Harp? What happened next would be debated for years. Ruth Harp emerged from the kitchen with a shotgun. Thomas appeared from upstairs with a rifle. They had the advantage. 2 guns aimed at Barrett while his pistol remained holstered. But Barrett was faster than they expected. Years of combat had honed reflexes, sharper than Thomas's nervous trigger finger. Barrett's first shot hit Thomas in the shoulder. His second caught Nathaniel in the leg. Ruth fired the shotgun, but terror ruined her aim. The blast took out a window instead of Barrett's head. The gunfight lasted 45 seconds. When it ended, Thomas was unconscious from blood loss. Nathaniel crawled toward the kitchen, his leg shattered. Ruth stood frozen, shotgun empty, facing Barrett's aimed revolver. The cellar. Barrett said quietly, "Take me to the cellar." Ruth Harp led Barrett down the cellar stairs, moving like a woman in a dream. She unlocked the heavy door. The smell hit Barrett first. A wave of decay so powerful he staggered. He'd been at Shiloh, Antietam, Gettysburg. He knew the smell of death, but this was worse. This was concentrated evil. Ruth lit a lantern. The cellar was 30 feet deep, hand dug into Missouri clay. The walls were earthen, supported by timber, and against the far wall, in a pit 10 feet long and 6 feet wide, were the bodies. 27 previous victims in various states of decay, and on top, fresh and recent, the 12 guests from December 18th. Barrett fell to his knees and vomited. He recognized Samuel Cross immediately. His friend lay on his back, eyes open, a massive wound in his temple. Near him were the Brennan children, still in their nightclothes, looking like they were asleep. Barrett wept. This hardened soldier who'd survived 4 years of war, who'd seen thousands die in battle, wept like a child. But then he heard it. A sound from deeper in the cellar. Movement, scratching. Someone was alive. In a small room behind the main cellar, locked behind another door, Barrett found her. Catherine Moore, the widow, barely conscious but alive. Ruth had made a mistake. The knife had missed the widow's heart by inches. Catherine had bled, lost consciousness, and been thrown into the storage room, left for dead but not quite dead enough. She'd awakened hours later in darkness, too weak to scream, slowly bleeding. She'd been dying for 8 days. Barrett carried her out. She would survive, barely, and her testimony would shock the nation. By afternoon, the sheriff arrived with a posse. They arrested the Harps. They excavated the cellar. They counted the bodies, 30. 9 victims total, ranging from a child of 6 years to a man of 70. The Harps had been killing for 2 years. Every lone traveler, every small family, every person who could disappear without immediate notice. All had been prey. The hotel had never been a hotel. It was a trap, a killing floor, a gateway to hell. The trial in January 1866 lasted 4 hours. Catherine Moore testified from a bed in the courtroom, still too weak to stand. She described waking in darkness, hearing screams, the smell of death. The jury deliberated for 7 minutes. Guilty, all 3 Harps, murder, 39 counts. They hanged them in St. Joseph on a Tuesday morning in February 1866. The whole town came to watch. Some people had traveled 200 miles to see justice done. Nathaniel Harp said nothing on the gallows. Ruth wept and prayed. But Thomas, the young man with soft hands, spoke final words. We never meant. Father said it was just business, that they were just travelers, just people passing through. How did it become so many? The trap door opened. They died quickly. The hangman was professional. The Gateway Hotel stood empty for 6 weeks. No one would buy it. No one would enter it. Children threw rocks at the windows. Preachers declared it cursed ground. In March, someone burned it down. The fire burned for 2 days. Witnesses claimed it burned hotter than normal wood, as if the building itself was eager to be destroyed. By April, nothing remained but the stone foundation and the infamous cellar. The sheriff ordered it filled with lime and dirt, sealed forever, but the stories persisted. Travelers claimed to hear screams on that stretch of road. Horses refused to pass where the hotel had stood. And on December nights, when storms rolled across Missouri, locals swore they could see lights in the darkness where the Gateway Hotel once stood, and hear the sound of a door closing, checking in guests. Forever, the Gateway Hotel murders inspired dozens of copycats in the following decades. In 1870, the Bender family in Kansas would use the same method, a hotel that served as a killing floor. Others would follow. But the Harps were the first, the original American serial killing family, the blueprint for horror. Catherine Moore survived her injuries and lived to age 76. She never traveled again. She never spoke of that night except at the trial. On her gravestone, her family inscribed, "She escaped hell itself." As for the 39 victims, most were identified and returned to families, but 6 remained unknown, travelers so completely alone that no one reported them missing. Their bodies rest in a mass grave in St. Joseph, marked with a simple stone, "Unknown Travelers 1008, 163-1008, 165. May God forgive us for not noticing their absence."